All right, guys. So one of the questions we get asked quite frequently, and a lot of times it's during our discovery calls, when we're talking about taking in a colt starting or a training horse. And the question is, do I wear spurs on my 2-year-olds or during my colt starting program? And the answer is absolutely yes. You know, every one of my horses end up riding with spurs on before they leave here. And I don't care if the owner doesn't ride with spurs, never intends to ride with spurs. My job is to prep this horse for the rest of his life, and that current owner may not be that horse's owner forever, or probably won't be the only person that rides that horse. So my job is to set him up for the rest of his life. So the answer is absolutely yes, I wear spurs. The second question we get asked quite a bit is, when do I start wearing spurs? Do I wear them on day one or towards the end? When do I start wearing them? And the answer is no, I don't start my colts first few rides with spurs on. And there's a lot of people that do, and they get along fine. And I'm not saying they're wrong. It's just that's not what I do. And the reason I don't do that is I feel like these colts, no matter how well I've prepped them for their first ride, they've still got a lot going on to figure out, a lot to be worried about. And if I'm riding this colt and he gets nervous and he decides to stop and duck and dive real fast, off to the right or off to the left, and I get unbalanced, well, my natural first instinct is going to be take a hold with my feet. And I've got spurs on, and I grab a hold of this colt. Well, he's already stopped and ducked and dived because he's nervous and scared, probably. And if I grab a hold of him with those spurs, I'm just going to add to that fear of that colt, and I'm going to make a bad situation even worse, and really have to come back and fix a lot of things with that colt. So I don't start my colts first few rides with spurs on. So the question becomes, well, when do you ride them? And I'm like, when they're ready. And they say, well, how do you know when they're ready? Well, on average for me, it's probably somewhere around that 14th or 15th ride I feel like they're ready. So what the colt needs to be doing is definitely he needs to be riding around on a loose rein at all 3 gaits. He needs to be fairly comfortable packing me around where he's not worried about me, what I'm doing up here. If I'm moving around, if I'm bumping him with my legs. I need him to be fairly responsive to my legs, meaning when I squeeze him, if I push on him, he's not jumping and overreacting my calf, but he's just moving off, and he's fairly responsive to that. Every once in a while, I'll still have to use a rein on the outside to spank him but again, he's not being overreactive to my legs. He's not worried about my legs moving around, flopping around on him, bumping on his sides. So when I've got that colt fairly responsive and he's not worried about me and what I'm doing, then I'll go ahead and I'll add the spurs on, and then I start him off. I just squeeze him with my calves, kind of bend him around like I would in a one rein stop, and then I'll add that spur and start on his hind end, just basically disengage that hind end with that spur. Because if he's going to be overreactive and jump and react to my spurs, I've already got him set up and myself in a situation where I can keep him basically under control and shut down. He can't buck real easy, he can't bolt off, he can't rear up. So I can basically keep him shut down and get him kind of used to feeling that spur, And this young colt I'm on, this was his first training session with spurs on, which is what made me go ahead and think about doing this video. And we're about halfway, 3/4 of the way through this training session, and this colt has handled these spurs really, really well. You know, he may not quite have 15 rides on him, but again, he's been fairly responsive to everything that I've done. He's kind of a laid back, chilled horse. He's a draft cross mix, so he's a little bit cold natured. So I felt like he could handle these, and also I'm probably going to end up needing my spurs quite a bit to reinforce my leg cues with him, because he is a little bit lazy, he is a little bit dull and unresponsive. So, I felt like he was ready for him. So I hope that answers a lot of people's questions when they do ask us about our programs before they, we're always happy to answer those questions directly. But if you already know those answers, we can kind of go ahead and skip it. And it's just a little bit more information about us and our programs that people want to know. So hope this helps.